I was standing in the hallway outside my husband's home office at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night when I heard him say the words that shattered my entire life. I had gotten up to use the bathroom, a nightly ritual at 7 months pregnant, and I noticed the light bleeding from underneath his office door. I would have walked right past it if I had not heard my name. Simone is not going to be a problem, Callum whispered into his phone, his voice carrying that sharp, clipped tone he used when he was closing a deal he did not want anyone to know about. We just need Tremblay to sign the psychiatric hold within 48 hours of delivery. Once she is committed, the emergency custody order goes straight to Vivian. Patrick's lawyers have the trust paperwork ready. The kid is in their hands by Christmas and nobody asks questions. I pressed my back against the cold wall of our Etobicoke townhouse and stopped breathing. My hand found my belly, and I felt my son kick hard against my palm as if he already knew something was terribly wrong. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight for something that should have been yours all along. My name is Simone and I am 28 years old. I work as a senior fraud investigator for one of the big 5 banks on Bay Street. My entire career is built on following the money, finding the lies people bury inside spreadsheets and shell corporations, and handing the evidence to the people who put them in handcuffs. I have taken down Ponzi schemes, mortgage fraud rings, and money laundering operations that moved millions through numbered companies in the Caribbean. I am very, very good at what I do. But nothing in my professional training prepared me for the moment I discovered that the man sleeping next to me every night was planning to steal my child and have me locked in a psychiatric ward. Callum and I met 3 years ago at a charity gala in Yorkville. He was charming, ambitious, and ran a mid-sized construction development firm that built luxury condos across the Greater Toronto area. He told me I was the most brilliant woman he had ever met. He said he loved that I had a career, that I was independent, that I did not need him for anything. I believed every word because I wanted to. We married after 14 months. His family welcomed me with open arms, or so I thought. His mother, Nadine, was a retired school principal from Mississauga who projected warmth and wisdom but controlled every member of her family with a quiet, suffocating grip. His sister, Vivian, was 5 years older than Callum and married to Patrick Bellerose, whose family owned commercial real estate across Montreal and Quebec City. Patrick came from the kind of generational francophone wealth that does not advertise itself. No flashy cars, no designer logos. Just a quiet trust fund with very specific rules. I learned the details of those rules over the next 48 hours. The night I overheard that phone call, I did not cry. I did not confront Callum. I did not pack a bag or call my mother in Brampton. Instead, I flushed the toilet to create an alibi, washed my shaking hands in cold water, and walked back to bed. Callum came in 20 minutes later, smelling like the single malt he kept in his office. He kissed my forehead and whispered goodnight. I lay perfectly still with my eyes closed, feeling his weight settle into the mattress beside me, and I began to plan. The next morning, Callum left early for a site visit in Vaughan. The moment his black Audi pulled out of the driveway, I opened my work laptop and started pulling threads. If someone was planning to have me involuntarily committed, there had to be a psychiatric professional willing to fabricate a diagnosis. Callum had mentioned the name Tremblay. It took me less than an hour to find him, Dr. Rémi Tremblay, a licensed psychiatrist operating a private practice in Oakville, specializing in perinatal mood disorders. His website was polished and professional. His Google reviews were glowing. But when I ran his name through the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario database, I found 2 prior complaints filed by patients alleging that Tremblay had provided falsified psychiatric assessments in family court custody disputes. Both complaints had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence. The patients were young mothers. Both had lost custody of their children. My blood went cold. This man had a pattern. He targeted vulnerable new mothers, weaponized their postpartum hormones against them, and handed their children over to whoever was paying his fee. And now my husband had hired him to do the same thing to me. I needed to understand the money. In my line of work, the motive is always financial. People do not orchestrate elaborate crimes for abstract reasons. They do it because someone, somewhere, is desperate for cash. I knew Callum's construction firm had been struggling. The condo market in the GTA had cooled sharply over the past 18 months. Interest rates were up, pre-construction sales had stalled, and I had noticed Callum coming home later and later, drinking more, snapping at small things. I attributed it to work stress. I was wrong. It was panic. I waited until Callum was asleep that night and went back into his office. His laptop was password protected, but he used the same password for everything, our wedding date reversed. I was inside in seconds. What I found made me physically ill. His firm owed $3.2 million to a private lending group based out of Markham. These were not the kind of lenders who sent polite letters from a law firm. The interest rate was compounding monthly at a rate that would be criminal if it were regulated. The most recent email from the lender was 3 weeks old and contained a single line that made my hands tremble. "We know where your wife parks at Union Station." Callum was not just broke. He was in danger, and he had dragged me into it. The only way out was a massive cash infusion, and the only source of that kind of money was his brother-in-law Patrick. But Patrick had his own problem. The Bellerose Family Trust, valued at just over $12 million, had a clause that required Patrick to produce a biological male heir by his 38th birthday. Patrick turned 38 on January 15th. Vivian had suffered 3 miscarriages over the past 4 years and had been told by her doctors in Montreal that she would never carry a pregnancy to term. Without a male heir, the trust would dissolve entirely, and the principal would be redirected to a charitable foundation. Patrick and Vivian were desperate, and I was due to deliver a boy in 8 weeks. The scheme clicked together in my mind like the tumblers of a lock. Callum would get me to the hospital when I went into labor. Dr. Tremblay would show up within 48 hours of delivery, armed with a fabricated psychiatric evaluation claiming I was suffering from severe postpartum psychosis. Under the Ontario Mental Health Act, a physician can issue a Form 1 to hold a patient involuntarily for up to 72 hours. During that hold, Callum and Vivian would file an emergency motion in family court for temporary custody, citing my supposed mental incapacity. A sympathetic or corrupt justice of the peace would sign the order. By the time I fought my way out of the psychiatric hold, my son would be in Montreal, legally in the care of Vivian and Patrick, and the trust fund paperwork would be filed. Callum would receive his payment, pay off the Markham lenders, and resume his life as a respectable developer. I would be left with a psychiatric record, a custody battle I could not afford, and a broken heart. They were not going to steal my baby from my arms. They were going to steal my mind first and then take everything else. I spent the next week building my case in absolute silence. During the day, I smiled at Callum, cooked dinner, rubbed my belly, and talked about paint colors for the nursery. At night, after he fell asleep, I became someone else entirely. I copied every financial document on his laptop onto an encrypted external drive. I downloaded the wire transfer records showing that Patrick had already moved $400,000 from the Bellerose Family Trust into a numbered company registered in Ontario under the name Cloverhill Consulting. The money had been deposited into Callum's business account and coded as a consulting fee. It was a down payment. They were buying my child on an installment plan. I called my old colleague Felix, a former RCMP officer turned private investigator who now worked contract jobs for financial institutions across the country. Felix was the kind of man who asked no unnecessary questions and delivered results that held up in court. I told him I needed full surveillance on Vivian and Patrick's home in Westmount and on Dr. Tremblay's clinic in Oakville. Felix did not hesitate. Within 3 days, Felix sent me a secure file that nearly broke me. High-resolution photographs showed a delivery truck from a premium children's furniture store parked in the circular driveway of Vivian and Patrick's limestone townhouse in Westmount. Workers were unloading a crib, a change table, a glider chair, and boxes labeled with boys' clothing. Felix had also captured a photograph through a second-floor window. The room was freshly painted a deep navy blue. Vivian was standing in the center of it, holding a tiny knitted sweater against her chest, smiling wider than I had ever seen her smile. They had already built a nursery for my son. They had already furnished a stolen kingdom for a child who was still growing inside me. The precision of it was suffocating. The following Sunday, Nadine insisted on hosting a family dinner at her house in Mississauga. I did not want to go. Every cell in my body screamed to stay home, lock the doors, and call the police. But I knew I needed more evidence before I went to the authorities. Financial fraud takes months to prosecute. I needed proof of the psychiatric conspiracy, and that meant I needed someone in that family to talk. Nadine's house was exactly what you would expect from a woman who believed appearances were more important than reality. Spotless hardwood floors, a dining table set with her best china, and a roast that smelled like it cost more than she could afford. Vivian and Patrick were already there when we arrived. Vivian hugged me tightly, resting her hand on my belly for a beat too long. "How is my nephew doing in there?" she murmured, her fingers pressing slightly into the fabric of my dress. Her nephew, not my baby. Her nephew. I smiled and said he was kicking up a storm. Patrick stood by the sideboard pouring himself a glass of wine. He was a tall, thin man with the kind of quiet arrogance that comes from never having been told no. He nodded at me politely and turned back to his phone. At dinner, Nadine steered the conversation exactly where she wanted it. She talked about how tired I looked, how stressful my banking job must be, how she had read an article about postpartum depression rates in Canada being at an all-time high. She asked if I had considered taking an extended maternity leave, maybe even stepping away from my career entirely. Simone, you work with such disturbing cases, she said, cutting into her roast with surgical precision. All that fraud and criminal activity, it cannot be good for a mother's mental health. I have seen it happen. Women who push themselves too hard after delivery end up completely falling apart. She was laying the groundwork. She was planting the narrative right in front of me, establishing the story they would tell the court when they had me committed. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my voice perfectly steady. I actually find that working keeps me grounded, Nadine. My firm has an excellent parental leave program, and I plan to take full advantage of it. Vivian leaned forward across the table. But what if something goes wrong, Simone? What if you are not okay after the delivery? It happens to so many women. You should not be ashamed to ask for help. We are family. We will always be here to step in if you need us. Step in. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. They were so confident, so certain that I was just a naive pregnant woman who would crumble under the weight of manufactured crises. They did not know that I had spent the past week building a fortress of evidence that would bury every single one of them. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and called my mother. Mom, I said, keeping my voice low. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I cannot explain everything right now, but I need you to know that when this baby comes, do not trust Callum. Do not trust his family. If anything happens to me, if anyone tells you I am sick or that I had a breakdown, do not believe them. Call Felix at this number immediately. My mother is a retired nurse from Brampton who raised 3 children on her own after my father passed. She does not scare easily. She listened to every word, asked me one question. Are you safe right now? I told her yes. She said she would be ready. That phone call was the single biggest improvement I could have made to my plan. The video I was living had taught me something the comments would later confirm. A woman fighting alone makes for a compelling story, but a woman with even one person she trusts makes for a believable one. 2 days after the dinner, Nadine showed up at my front door with a suitcase. She announced that she was moving in for the final weeks of my pregnancy to help around the house. Callum acted surprised, but I saw the rehearsed gratitude on his face. She was not there to help me, she was there to watch me. Within hours, she had rearranged my kitchen, thrown away half my groceries, and installed herself in the guest room directly beside the master bedroom. That evening, she placed a small white bottle on the kitchen counter. No pharmacy label, no DIN number, just a strip of masking tape with my initial written in marker. Dr. Ashworth sent these through Callum this morning, she said, shaking the bottle so the pills rattled. He said your iron levels are dangerously low, and you need to take one of these every day with your lunch. Dr. Ashworth was my obstetrician. I had never discussed iron supplements with him, and no legitimate physician in Canada dispenses unlabeled medication through a patient's husband. I knew exactly what this was. I picked up the pill, brought it toward my mouth, and at the last second knocked a glass of water off the counter with my elbow. While Nadine bent to grab a towel, I palmed the pill and swallowed a breath mint from my pocket instead. That night, after everyone was asleep, I crushed a fragment of the pill and tested it with a reagent kit Felix had left in a drop package under our back deck. The liquid turned deep purple. It was misoprostol, a drug used to induce labor. They were trying to force me into early delivery so they could control the timeline. I replaced every pill in the bottle with calcium tablets I had bought from Shoppers Drug Mart. Same size, same chalky white color. Nadine watched me swallow one every single day, completely convinced she was slowly pushing my body toward a premature crisis. I let her believe it. Felix's surveillance on Dr. Tremblay produced exactly what I needed 5 days later. He recorded a phone conversation between Tremblay and Callum, in which Tremblay explicitly discussed the language he would use in the Form 1 assessment. The doctor said he would cite paranoid ideation, delusional thinking, and inability to care for a dependent. He said he had done this 4 times before and the system never questioned a physician's clinical judgment. Callum asked how much time they would have once the psychiatric hold was issued. Tremblay said 72 hours was more than enough for Vivian's lawyers to file the emergency motion. I have a very cooperative justice of the peace in Brampton, Tremblay added. He does not ask uncomfortable questions. I saved the recording to 3 separate encrypted drives and uploaded a copy to a secure cloud server that Felix maintained for his highest-risk cases. The evidence was now untouchable. The baby shower was held the following Saturday at a restaurant in Yorkville that Vivian had booked. It was lavish, expensive, and designed entirely to project the image of a loving, supportive family. I wore a simple black dress and a wireless microphone taped to my sternum underneath the fabric. Vivian gave a speech about how much she loved being an aunt and how she could not wait to hold the baby. Patrick drank steadily through the afternoon, and by his 4th glass of wine, his careful mask began to slip. He cornered me near the dessert table when Callum was across the room talking to his business partners. You know, Simone, Patrick said, swirling his wine and staring at my stomach, my family has a tradition of naming the firstborn son after my grandfather. I have been thinking a lot about names lately. I looked at him calmly. That is a nice tradition, Patrick, but this is my son. I will be choosing his name. He laughed, a thin, humorless sound. Of course you will, for now. He leaned closer, his breath heavy with Bordeaux. Just take care of yourself, Simone. Take care of what is growing in there. My entire future depends on what comes out of you in a few weeks. The microphone caught every syllable. My entire future depends on what comes out of you. Callum appeared behind Patrick and physically pulled him away, whispering furiously in his ear. Patrick shrugged him off and stumbled toward the bar. That night, I compiled the complete dossier and sent it to 3 recipients. The first was a sergeant I had worked with at the RCMP's Financial Crime Unit in Ottawa. I flagged it as an active conspiracy involving wire fraud, medical malpractice, and what I believed constituted an attempt at unlawful confinement and child trafficking through fraudulent court orders. The second copy went to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario with an urgent complaint against Dr. Tremblay, including the audio recording of him discussing fabricated psychiatric assessments. The third copy went to the Bellerose family's trust administrator in Montreal, a corporate law firm that managed the $12 million fund. I included Patrick's recorded confession from the baby shower and a polite note explaining that any disbursement from the trust would likely be seized as evidence in a criminal investigation. I clicked send and closed my laptop. The digital bombs were in the air. There was no taking them back. 1 week later, on a freezing Wednesday evening in November, Callum came home from the office with a wild, frantic energy I had never seen before. Nadine was in the kitchen preparing dinner. He walked past her without a word, came upstairs to where I was resting in the bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed. His hands were shaking. Simone, he said, his voice tight and artificial. I just got off the phone with Dr. Ashworth. He is concerned about your blood pressure readings from last week. He wants you to come into the clinic tonight for monitoring. Just a precaution. There was no blood pressure issue, Doctor. Ashworth had not called. This was the trigger. They were moving the timeline up. I let my face crumble into fear. Oh my God, is the baby okay? I whispered, gripping the bedsheets. Callum put his hand on my knee, and his touch felt like a shackle. Everything is fine, babe. We just need to get you checked out. I have a car coming. A car. Not an ambulance, not a taxi. A private vehicle to take me to a location they controlled. I let him help me down the stairs. Nadine was waiting in the foyer with my hospital bag, already packed. She did not look worried. She looked satisfied. A dark SUV was idling in the driveway. The driver was a large man I had never seen before. Callum guided me into the back seat, and Nadine climbed in beside me. The vehicle pulled out of the driveway and turned south, away from the hospital where I was registered, heading toward Oakville. In the back seat, I slipped my hand into my coat pocket and sent a pre-written text message to the RCMP sergeant, one word. Now, we arrived at a private clinic I had never visited before. It was a sleek, modern building set back from the road behind a row of mature trees. The parking lot was empty except for 2 vehicles. One was a luxury sedan with Quebec plates. Vivian and Patrick were already inside. Dr. Tremblay met us in the lobby. He was a compact man with rimless glasses and a practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. He shook Callum's hand and looked at me the way a butcher looks at livestock. Simone, how are we feeling tonight? Just a routine check, nothing to worry about. They walked me down a corridor to a private examination room. The door had a lock on the outside. Vivian was standing in the hallway holding a pale blue receiving blanket. She reached out to touch my arm as I passed. It is all going to be fine, Simone, she said. We are going to take such good care of everything. Inside the room, Tremblay closed the door and pulled out a clipboard. He did not ask about my blood pressure. He did not take my vitals. He sat down across from me and began asking questions designed to build a case for involuntary commitment. Have you been feeling overwhelmed lately, Simone? Any thoughts of harming yourself or your baby? Do you sometimes feel like people are watching you or planning something against you? I answered each question calmly and clearly. No, no. But I could see him writing notes that did not match my answers. He was constructing a fictional patient on that clipboard. He was writing the story of a woman who had lost her mind, and he was going to use it to take my son. Callum stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed, watching. His jaw was tight, he would not look at me. Tremblay finished his notes and stood up. I am going to recommend a short observation period, Simone. Just a couple of days. Your husband and your sister-in-law will handle everything with the baby while you rest. He reached into a drawer and produced a syringe filled with clear fluid. This is just a mild sedative to help you relax. I looked at the needle. I looked at Callum. I looked at the locked door. And I said no. I am not taking any medication. I want to leave this clinic right now. Callum pushed off the wall. Simone, stop being difficult. The doctor knows what is best. Tremblay stepped toward me with the syringe raised. Callum moved behind me and grabbed both of my arms, pinning them against the examination chair. The paper crinkled beneath me as I thrashed against his grip. His fingers dug into my biceps hard enough to bruise, and then the building shook. The front entrance of the clinic exploded inward as RCMP tactical officers breached the lobby in a coordinated entry that had been planned for hours. I heard the thundering boots on the tile floor, the shouted commands echoing down the corridor, and the sharp metallic sound of doors being forced open one after another. The examination room door burst open. Two officers in full tactical gear flooded inside, weapons drawn, red laser sights cutting through the fluorescent light. RCMP, release her immediately and get on the ground. Callum let go of my arms so fast I nearly fell forward. He stumbled backward into the wall, his hands shooting into the air, his face drained of every last trace of color. Tremblay dripped the syringe. It shattered on the tile floor, the clear sedative pooling harmlessly around his polished shoes. Sergeant Alain Cote walked into the room behind the tactical team, holding up his badge. He was calm, professional, and utterly unimpressed by the scene in front of him. Simone, are you hurt? He asked, holstering his weapon and stepping carefully around the broken glass. I told him I was fine. I told him the baby was fine. Through the open door I could see the hallway. Patrick was face down on the floor, with an officer's knee on his back, screaming about his lawyers and his family name. Nobody cared. Vivian was sitting against the wall with the blue blanket still clutched to her chest, sobbing as a female officer recited her charter rights in both English and French. Nadine stood frozen near the reception desk, her mouth opening and closing without sound, as if the script she had rehearsed for weeks had suddenly been ripped from her hands, and she had no idea what to say without it. Callum was pulled to his feet, turned around and handcuffed. As the officer pushed him toward the door, he looked at me over his shoulder. His eyes were wet. Simone, please. I was trying to protect our family. I was just trying to fix things. I did not say a word. I just watched him walk away in handcuffs, down the corridor, past his crying sister, past his frozen mother, and out into the cold November night where the RCMP cruisers were parked in a semicircle, with their lights painting the trees red and blue. The legitimate paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked my vitals, confirmed the baby was stable, and transported me to Mount Sinai Hospital downtown, where I delivered my son 14 hours later. My mother was beside me the entire time, holding my hand, steady and unbreakable. The federal prosecutors moved quickly. The evidence I had compiled was comprehensive enough to support multiple charges. Callum was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, uttering threats, forcible confinement, and assault. His construction firm was seized by creditors within a week, and the Markham lenders sent their own lawyers to pick over the wreckage. Tremblay's medical license was suspended pending a full investigation by the college, and 3 of his previous patients were contacted by investigators. 2 of them agreed to reopen their cases. Patrick was charged with conspiracy and fraud relating to the trust fund. The Bellerose family trust administrator froze all disbursements the day they received my dossier. His father issued a public statement through a Montreal law firm disavowing his son and revoking his access to all family assets. Vivian was charged as a co-conspirator, a detail that mattered to me because the people who watched my story later would have been furious if she had walked free. Nadine was charged with administering a noxious substance and conspiracy. The unlabeled misoprostol pills were tested by Health Canada and confirmed to be a controlled medication dispensed without a prescription or medical supervision. None of them received bail. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of a small but bright two-bedroom apartment in Leslieville, warming a bottle for my son while the spring sunlight poured through the windows. I bought the apartment with my own savings. I did not need a man's money, and I certainly did not need a family that viewed my child as a financial instrument. My mother visited every weekend from Brampton, spoiling her grandson with hand-knitted sweaters and the Trinidadian lullabies she used to sing to me. The apartment was modest. There were no chandeliers, no marble countertops, no designer furniture. But the nursery was painted a warm golden yellow, and the crib was solid and safe. And the rocking chair in the corner was the first piece of furniture I bought with my own paycheck after the divorce was finalized. It was not a $12 million legacy, it was something better, it was real. My son will grow up knowing exactly who fought for him and exactly who tried to sell him. He will grow up knowing that his mother did not crumble when the people who were supposed to love her tried to break her apart. He will grow up knowing that the skills they mocked, the career they belittled, and the intelligence they underestimated were the very things that saved his life. If my story taught me one thing, it is this. The people who are supposed to protect you are sometimes the ones you need to protect yourself from. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even when everyone around you is smiling. And never, ever let anyone convince you that asking for help makes you weak. The strongest thing I did was not building the case against my husband. It was picking up the phone and calling my mother. Have you ever had to use your own skills to protect yourself or someone you love from people who should have been on your side? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more real stories of women who refuse to be silenced. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are strong enough to fight back. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are the only author of your own story.